I want to thank Trevor for organising this great event, along with the other people. I also want to reference a gentleman at the back of this hall who has done so much to assist people in mortgage difficulty over the last 10 years or so. He's the man that, along with his wife Adrian, set up the Hub Ireland, and they have saved many lives, many people that would be in the graveyards around this country. They have saved many lives over the years, and that's Byron Jenkins. As King Henry VIII said to each of the 6 wives, I won't keep you very long. Come here, just as a prologue, do you hear me there? Am I kind of, yeah. Just as a prologue from Ashling's contribution earlier, you know, she kind of expressed frustration about the way the system is, and you know how difficult it is, you know, in relation to activism. But we are all in this country. We are all slaves to a corrupt political system. And you know, you'll find people, you get very annoyed, you get very upset with the fact that election after election we seem to re-elect the same kind of people. The 2 misused words in this country are independent, and the word independent and the word change. Because in Ireland, the more things change, the more they stay the same. Now, just to explain that, you know, briefly before I start my own story, many of our politicians and our mainstream political parties, they feed off this corrupt system. And before somebody hands me a tinfoil hat, I'll just briefly explain what I'm on about. I spoke to a couple of people. I ran for election in 2016 for the general election. And not that I was anything special enough, but I gave it a go, and I ran as a candidate in Cavan and Monaghan. And the people in Cavan and Monaghan are very wise. They decided not to elect me. But after 3 days of campaigning, I knew I didn't have a chance. I met one gentleman in Cavan Town, and he told me that although he admired me greatly, he couldn't vote for me because he had to vote for another named politician because he got a grant for his mother. And I explained to him, you know, he didn't get a grant for your mother. Your mother was entitled to the grant. Oh no, he got a grant for my mother. I spoke to another gentleman recently, and his young son has a medical condition that was causing him serious irritation, pain and suffering. And he was told that he'd be 18 months on a list for assessment, 18 months on a waiting list to get on a waiting list for treatment. And he contacted a certain politician. And within 3 weeks, the full procedure had been carried out. So now, that gentleman, along with the other man I mentioned, and these are real people, not the imaginary people Andy Kenny used to meet in his travels, they now owe their loyalty to politicians. And that's the way that our political system our politicians keep feeding off the corrupt system. Just briefly, in relation to my own story, I was born in Cavan, and I think the previous speaker, you don't think he's very impressed with Cavan. He was kind of casting a few little jibes in the direction of that great county and its occupants and its citizens. But my parents met in England, and they went off. My daddy and mammy went off. My mother was from Gortnaguna. It's between Rossgrey and Templemore in Tipperary. And my daddy was from Mullaghorden in Cavan. And of course, like most young people, or many young people in those days, they had to drift off, they had to leave Ireland to put bread on the table. And in those days, there were no Ryanair flights available to come home in half an hour. Once you went, you were gone for the long term. But my mother started off working in retail in Dublin, and my father started off working in a pub in Belfast. I don't know whether any of you have ever heard of a priest called Father Des Wilson. He's a very famous priest, but he's actually a cousin of mine. and my father worked in his father's pub in Belfast. But they ended up going to England, and they met up in Birmingham, and they got married in 1957. And I was conceived in Birmingham, and I was born in Cavan. That's my claim to, one of my claims to fame. But I grew up in a rural area. I was a very kind of shy, introverted little fella. You know, I suppose in those days we didn't have a car, and you were kind of greatly confined to the area that you were brought up in. But anyhow, we got our first television. Sorry, my first memory is when I was about 5 years of age, of seeing my mother pushing an old heavy, you know, the old heavy bikes up the lane to our house with the weekly messages tied to the front of it and tied to the back of it, you know, the old carrier. And people talk about hardship now, but anyhow, we got our first television in 1974. It was an old black and white television. And my love affair with all things policing began when we got that television. I watched quite a bit of American cop shows, quite a few American cop shows, and television was my escapism. I used to love, you know, my imagination used to run wild, but watching programs like Hawaii Five-0 and the Rockford Files and Quincy, and I can keep going. But I left school. I really wanted to be a rock star, and I went to St. Pat's College in Cavan in 1976. I did okay for the first 3 years. I did my intercert, reasonably okay, not a brilliant intercert, but I kind of passed through it. I got a pass. But I wanted to leave school at 16 years of age, and I wanted to become a rock star. I wanted to go off and form a band. There was only one little drawback: I can't sing. That's the only drawback. But anyhow, I continued. I went back to school. I went back to school for the following 2 years. I didn't do anything, only daydream, and look out the window. But you know, it's the way that people don't realise that a kind word can have a serious effect on somebody's life. When I was about 16 or so, we had these, you know, kind of job experience interviews that were organised by the college, St. Patrick's College, and we all had a choice of what to do. Like, you know, some guys wanted to kind of do agricultural contracting or become farmers or whatever. But I decided to do the interview, and they brought in a couple of guards from the local Garda station, and I decided to do that interview, you know, the mock interviews. So those two gentlemen, although I can't remember their names, and they're probably long, you know, they may be dead or gone at this stage, I don't know, but they treated me very, very kindly. And I suppose I thought I was very, very smart and very, very bright, but obviously they were very, very kind, and it sowed the seed of what would become my future career. And at that time, recruitment to An Garda Síochána was limited to, you had to be 19 years of age to apply for An Garda Síochána. And I had just turned 18, and I was out milking the cows. We had an old boiler across from the house, and we had no milking machine, and milking the cows meant, you know, it meant by hand. And I was out milking the cows one Sunday morning, and my mother came out, and she told me that they were taking guards at 18 years of age. At that stage, like all good Fianna Fáil families, we used to buy the Sunday Press, and that's what she saw the advertisement in it. So a couple of days, I think it was the next day, I went into the Garda, the old Cavan barracks, and I spoke to a sergeant called Tony McLaughlin, a very, very decent man. He ended his career as an inspector, and I filled out the application forms to join the Guards, to do the exam, to join the Garda Síochána. And I did the exam. I think I got 935 in the actual exam that I'd done. That's the number. But I was lucky enough in those days that they were recruiting thousands of guards, so I was lucky enough I got through. So as I said, I was a very, very kind of shy, quiet young fellow, young teenager. And but anyhow, we had no car at home, and on the 22nd of September 1982, my mother asked the next door neighbour to drive me down to Templemore. And we headed off, myself, my mother and this neighbour, we headed off on the long journey to the training centre in Templemore. And I was sick to this, my stomach was absolutely sick to be leaving home, you know, I mean, it was absolutely terrible. So we arrived outside Templemore anyway, and I met this other guy called Declan O'Neill, and he was older than me. I was only just 19. This guy was in his mid-20s, and he had a lovely Opel Manta, you know the Opel Manta cars. And I was feeling very, very miserable outside the gates of Templemore. But anyhow, I met this guy anyway, and he drove me the last couple of yards into the training centre. And the next day, you know, usually, now, thanks be to God, my own children, my youngest son is teaching in Abu Dhabi, like they're all, from a young age now, they kind of, unlike their father, my children are very social people, you know, they're not oddballs like me, but anyhow, the next day, the 23rd of September 1982, we had our first policing duties lecture. And one of the first things that our instructor told us to do was that we had to enforce the laws of the land without fear, favour, malice or ill will. In other words, we had to enforce the laws of the land equally to everybody. Now, in hindsight, that particular lecture should have began once upon a time, because that's the way all fairy tales begin, you know. But I passed out, you know, in fairness, the training it knocked the edges off me. It gives you the training. We were taught that, and this is where a lot of the problems that have arisen over the years kind of originated. We were taught that we were something special, that we could only depend on our colleagues. In other words, there was this, I don't know whether any of you are familiar, but you know, some of you might know somebody who went off to join the Guards, and you know, after a couple of weeks, you would have noticed great changes in their demeanour and the way, you know, there might have been the life and soul of the party, but after joining the Guards, they might have been acting slightly differently after joining. But the training was fantastic. I mean, it knocked the edges off me. It instilled the confidence that I have today. It created this monster you have in front of you. But I passed out in life, there are certain days we can describe as being perfect days. You know, the birthday of children, the day you get married or whatever. You know, you can there are certain days you can describe and you can call perfect days. And the day that I passed out in Templemore was one of those days. It was a perfect day. Everything went right. My family was there the whole day. I mean, everything was absolutely perfect. And the next day, I headed for Dublin. My first station was Pearse Street in Dublin. And we were called the Gentleman of the Bee. There's another, I'm not going to name him or embarrass him, but there's another gentleman in the audience. He had a long and distinguished service in the Garda Síochána, and he served across in Store Street on the north side. Now, we were the Gentleman of the Bee in Pearse Street, this side of the Liffey, and he was stationed in Store Street, and they weren't called gentlemen. You know, we were the gentlemen. I don't know what they called them, but anyhow, I started off. I had been to Dublin several times. Okay, as a young fella, I used to go. My only holidays were up to Listadale Road up in Crumlin in Drimna. My aunt and uncle, God mercy them, they lived there. I used to go up visiting them. You know, that was my only experience of Dublin before that. But my first beat, I was sent out on the beat around Wellington Quay, Aston Quay, that area, and on my own. It was some experience. I was very, very impressed, let's say. I was highly impressed with my new career. And like everyone else that joins the Guards, everyone joins the Guards to do good, you know, to look after people, to help people, to enforce the laws of the land, to treat everybody equal. Corruption is not an issue at that stage. I mean, it wouldn't be on the radar. You know, in relation to many Guards are they're very decent, honourable people who set out just to kind of do a good job and to have a fulfilling career. But a short while after I joined the Guards, after I passed out and I was working in Pearse Street, I learned a very harsh lesson that, you know, the laws of the land were not meant to be enforced equally. among all our citizens. I got a phone call to return to the station. I was on the beat around Grafton Street or whatever. I got a phone call to return to the station. And I went back to Pier Street, and I went down to a little office off the main corridor. It was actually the collator's office. And I spoke to a sergeant and a guard that worked there, and they told me that there was going to be a phone call for me in a short while, just to sit there and wait for the phone call. But the phone call duly arrived anyway, and the phone was handed over to me, and it was a very prominent politician. I'm not going to name him at this stage, but anyway, a very prominent politician. He asked me to do me a favour, that I had stopped somebody that was close to him for no tax, no seatbelt, whatever it was, anyway, I can't remember. And that I had summoned this person to court, and that he wanted me to take care of it. And I just kind of hemmed and thought, whatever, I just thought, whatever, that was fine, but I duly looked after the summons, because the individuals in the office, they knew the contents of the phone call, they knew what was going to be asked of me, and it was intimated to me that it was expected that I would take care of the summons. It was that's what I was meant to do. So at that moment, I was still only 19 years of age, and I was full of the joys of spring, so to speak, and I realised at that stage that, you know, the bubble was burst, that the laws did not apply to everybody equally. But anyhow, I continued on, doing the best I could, and I was, in early 1997, I was transferred to Kilmainham. Now, I thought I knew about policing, but I knew nothing, because Kilmainham at that stage, I mean, with Kevin Street and Kilmainham were in the A district. That's what it was called, and still is called. And at that stage, we had the highest number of convicted people in Europe living in the actual area. And by Christ, I mean, from what I'd learned in the last couple of years, it didn't set me up for what I was about to experience in Kilmainham. The scourge of drugs, drug addiction, AIDS, the AIDS crisis was rampant at that stage. And I was meeting young men and young women, and they were ravaged by drugs. They were infected with the HIV, with the AIDS virus. In those days, the HIV virus was a death sentence. There was no saving. There was no saving them, you know. I remember one particular case, and it has stuck in my memory ever since. I arrested a young fella. Forgive me if I'm wandering here, I have a habit of doing that, but anyhow, I arrested a young fella in a plaster molding factory in Rialto, off the South Circle Road. A young man, he was only in his, 18 or 19 years of age. He was only a skinny little thing, you know, skinny little lad. And I arrested him for burglary. And I brought him back to the station anyway, and he was a heroin addict. And I released him on bail to turn up in court. And he didn't turn up in court, of course, which wasn't unusual, because some of these people, they couldn't remember they couldn't remember turning up in court, basically. I mean, it was that simple. I mean, their addiction, anyone that's addicted to alcohol, to drugs, they're only interested in getting the next fix, the next point. They don't give a damn. I mean, they live from hour to hour, from day to day. But anyhow, a couple of weeks later, I got a call to go up to Dolphin House Flats, and a body had been found in one of the flats. And I walked into the flat anyway, and there was this bloated figure lying on a couch with a syringe stuck in his arm. And it was the skinny little young fella that I'd arrested 2 weeks earlier for burglary. I mean, that's why when people talk about legalising drugs, I kind of get rather angry, you know. Okay, I think there should be a debate in relation to a debate on drugs and what to do about it, but I have a serious problem with legalising drugs. But anyhow, that's from painful experience I have formed that opinion. Just to cut a very long story short, I could go on. I was the first, and I won't dwell on this too long, but I was the first uniformed Garda officer to have a beard in the Guards. I fought hard. I fought damn hard to get a beard. I can tell you that much. It was one of the most precious regulations. I remember an old former colleague of mine telling me that back in the 1970s or the early 70s, you know, it was the fashion of the day for men to have a locks down to here, kind of cut, you know, shaped across here, a locks, you know, sideburns, sorry, or locks. And this old colleague told me that there was an old chief superintendent who came into the station one day, and he saw one particular guard, and he said, you know, your sideburns are too long. Believe it or not, okay, people can rob, all people have been robbed all over the country. And this was one of the most precious regulations where you couldn't grow a beard or facial hair. Lunacy, but anyhow, this chief superintendent says to this guard, your sideburns are too long. And your man says, no, they're not, sir. So your man took out a ruler, a wooden ruler, and he measured the guard's fucking sideburns. They're the type of, I was going to say ginnets, but that'd be an insult to decent ginnets everywhere. But anyhow, I had a condition. I have a condition called folliculitis Barbie. That my beard doesn't grow normally. It grows. It comes out crossed. It's like a lot of African American men have it, you know, and that's what it is. You know, it's a kind of a condition. It's a skin condition that shaving pulls the face off. Your regular shaving. If you go divide shaving for 2 or 3, I know this is a stupid subject for some people, but anyhow, if you could divide shaving for a couple of days, fine. But we'll shave every day, and the face was pulled flipping off. But anyhow, in 1988. I tried to change the Garda. This is where I came on the radar first. I tried to change the regulations to allow uniformed guards to wear a beard. Okay, I fought that battle for many years. After finishing up in 1997, I was transferred out to Lucan and Leixlip. I was getting near to Cavan at the time, and in 1997, and I decided, I worked there a few years, but in the end of the year 2000, I decided, you know, I'm 37 years of age, I can't grow a beard, this is bloody stupid, we're meant to be a modern police force. So I started fucking pounding away again, and I applied for Cavan and Monaghan. I think they transferred me down to Cavan, Monaghan, down to Emmyvale and Monaghan, the furthest point they could find for me anyway, but anyhow, I was in my home division. But anyhow, one day I decided I've had enough. This would have been early 2000, about March, April 2001. I was in Emmyvale station in Cavan and Monaghan, so I decided I wasn't going to shave anymore. So I turned up in uniform with a beard. Okay, I put them on notice. I was a good boy. I let them know what I was going to do. I didn't no shocks to them. But I sent in a letter anyway, I'm not going to shave anymore. Now, bearing in mind an area of crime all over the place. But anyhow, I arrived in at 6 o'clock in the morning to Emmyvale, and it was like there was after being a murder committed, there was a team waiting on me inside the station. Now, in fairness, the superintendent at the time, he was a very, very decent man. I have no complaints. He just says, Johnny says, the regulations are you can't work in uniform with a beard. He was bloody embarrassed, the man, you know. But here I was, a big stubble on my face and the beard, and they couldn't let me out. It was inappropriate to have a uniformed officer seen in public with a beard. I swear to Almighty God. Okay, it was one of the most prized regulations. There's a code of regulations in the Guard. Okay, honest to Christ Almighty. You know, this was a major regulation. Clean-shaven guards. End of story. But anyhow. He says, Johnny says, I can't let you out in public with a beard. So anyhow, there was a sergeant there at the time anyway. He accompanied the superintendent from Monaghan. He was part of the reception committee. So anyhow, they led the prisoner with the beard into Monaghan. I was taken into Monaghan station. And when they were trying to figure out what to do, they confined me to the communications room on the roof, at the top of the Garda station, right? I was good enough to answer the phone, but I couldn't be seen, you know. I suppose I'm a scary enough sight at the best of times, but the beard, Jesus, this was like a Stephen King novel, but anyhow. But anyhow, I'm a very, very stubborn individual, and I decided that I wasn't going to take this lying down, that my Uncle John was a former Taoiseach. You know the man with the big white hair, he was a Fianna Fáil Taoiseach. He's an uncle of mine, and I have a brother, a Fianna Fáil senator. All we have in common is we have the same parents. I don't get carried away with my politics. I'm a lapsed Fianna Fáil supporter. But anyhow, I started the campaign and I tried to raise it with the GRA, and of course a lot of them thought this was, you know, silly and stupid, and, you know, what's Wilson doing looking to grow a beard for, you know? But to me it was very, very important, very, very important. So I was on with Marion Finucane. There's a very good journalist called Barry O'Kelly. A couple of journalists covered the story, and my story was splashed all over the front of several newspapers, every newspaper in the country. My case about the beard was on it, you know. I was on Marion Finucane, and by the way, guards are not meant to do interviews to the media. I mean, that's another no-no. That's another, you know, it depends on who you are, as we get to in a minute. I was on Marion Finucane. This was in early 2001. In the aftermath of me appearing on the Marion Finucane programme, there was another Council of War call for Monaghan Garda Station. The chief superintendent ran away because they were phoning up, there was journalists phoning up, and he didn't know how to handle the press, so he ran away out of the station. But they appointed, in the aftermath of all of the newspaper articles, they appointed an inspector to investigate me for talking to the media. Okay? But anyhow, a couple of months later, I threatened to take them all the way to the European Court of Human Rights. The GRA, in fairness to them, the Garda Representative Association, and I won't say in fairness to them very often, I can assure you, but on this occasion, they decided to, I was an irritant, so they got a man called Dermot Gleeson. He's the former Attorney General, many of you might know him. He ended up as one of the banks, I think, or the CEO, and Byron Jenkins will know who I'm talking about. But anyhow, he gave them a legal opinion that they were in a hole and to stop digging. So in May 2001, they changed the regulations that I could keep the beard. But they changed them on strict medical grounds, that only guards with skin conditions or whatever could grow a beard, and that's the way it is until this day, right? Now, I applied to get out. I applied to get out of the loft. I applied to get out of my prison cell in Monaghan, where I was up in the loft answering phones. And in October 2002, on the 16th of October 2002, I was transferred over to Clonus Garda Station, where I met Maurice McCabe for the first time. And Maurice, we bonded. Of course, Maurice McCabe, very, very high standards. Oh my God! I mean, to talk about, he was the most, absolutely, the highest of standards of any, you know, of any guard or any sergeant I ever met. I worked for many years in Dublin. My daughter was born in August 1987. And of course, I had no briefcase in my files or whatever. I had a Pampers box and bits of papers and everything. So that's why I carried my files around the place, you know. But I met Maurice anyway, and a few months later, Maurice was the sergeant in charge of Clonus Garda Station. And a couple of months later, he called me into his office. And I says to myself, what am I after doing wrong? What am I after doing wrong now? I know I didn't think he was trying, but he told me that he was, you know, because I was a very, very hard worker. Any station I went to, I was a very, very hard worker. You know, they say self-praise is no praise, but whatever, so what? He called me in anyway, and he was very happy. I mean, I was a very hard worker or whatever, but he told me that, he told me that before I went over to Clonus, now this is where the character assassination started. He said, before you arrived here in Clonus, he said, you were dirt. When you arrived in the station, he says, you were dirt. He says, your name had been destroyed. I was told that you were a troublemaker, to watch you couldn't be trusted. And all because I wanted to alleviate the pain and suffering I was going through with the bloody having to shave every day. I mean, I was fighting, it was a human rights issue, but anyhow, my respect for the man really grew at that point, you know. Absolutely 100%, you couldn't get a better person than Maurice McCabe. But that was grand, we walked away normally, we hunted drunken drivers together, we were rammed, we were fucking, oh, we've been to some serious scrapes over the following few years. But in October 2004, Maurice McCabe, there were serious difficulties in the Bailieborough district. You know all about Cavan and with charging and whatever. But there were serious difficulties in Bailieborough. Right, there was no, you had young guards in Bailieborough. You know, for want of a better word, they were feral. They were doing whatever they wanted. There was no supervision. They were just operating the way they wanted to operate. There was no bloody law. There was no lower order on the guards, let alone out in the wider community. But Maurice McCabe was sent over to Bailieborough to clean up the Bailieborough district. Okay, he was sent over there as sergeant in charge, and he went off anyway. And he obviously encountered serious difficulties. But anyhow, our paths didn't cross a great deal. We met each other an odd time over the next 4 years. Okay? And towards the last third of 2008, there was a vicious, dirty, filthy rumour circulating in the division. Now, a lot of you that would have followed the charge and inquiry will know what I'm talking about. Okay, I'm not going to go into details to it, you know, but anyhow, there was this dirty, filthy rumour going around circulating relating to Maurice McCabe and a young girl. Okay? Instead of nudge the next guy, I phoned him directly because I have no tolerance for gossip or tittle-tattle. I have no tolerance for. I phoned up Maurice McCabe and I explained to him what I'd heard, and he said to me, he said, "You have no idea what's been going on in my life." And he gave me an outline of what was happening, and the various incidents that he tried to highlight. He got absolutely no support. He was sent over to clean up a very dysfunctional Garda district, and he got absolutely no support from Garda management when he attempted to do that. Right? I better be careful because there's legal action pending, so I better not go into any specific case. But I was supporting him from that point. And in 2011, we became aware that the penalty point system was being abused, that there was a lot of dodginess in relation to the penalty points system. Penalty points, nobody likes getting penalty points, and by some miracle, and I obviously have a lot of prayers said that I've never been caught speeding, and that's absolutely, it's a miracle, it's one of the many miracles. But anyhow, we discovered that tens of thousands of speeding tickets and penalty points and fixed charge penalty notices had been terminated by senior members of Garda Síochána. And I'm sure you've seen some very high-profile people named in the media as having had penalty points wiped. It became very, very obvious from checking on the pulse system, it became very, very obvious that there were clusters. There were people getting taken care of. Not once, not twice, not 3 times, 4, 5, 6 times, the same names were coming up. They'd been caught speeding, but they were having the speeding tickets taken care of by guards, by senior guard officers. And we estimated around there was in the region of 10,000 speeding tickets per year were being corruptly terminated, or being fixed, ticket fixing. Now, to many people, as I said, getting a speeding ticket in the post would be a matter of serious concern, and it would cause a lot of annoyance, and it would cause a lot of difficulty for certain people. They'd be kind of very, very worried about their insurance premium rising and whatever. But to many other people, to those in the know, all it necessitated was a phone call to a senior guard for this irritation to go away. That's the law. That's Ireland. Okay. We had judges. We had, everybody. Anyone that was connected to a guard had the tickets looked at. Speeding tickets were taken care of. Listen, there was one guy. I think there were people caught on mobile phones. There were people speeding. There was one prominent person was caught speeding at 150 kilometres an hour on the National Carriageway. The guard stopped him and knew who he was, a very prominent person, sports person. And the guard knew who he was, but still issued him with a ticket. Issued him, he didn't kind of, he didn't use his discretion, he issued a ticket. And obviously a senior officer was contacted behind the guard's back, and the speeding ticket went away. There are at least 2 judges sitting on the bench today in this country giving out fines for speeding and sending people to jail who had 6 penalty points wiped, at least 6 penalty points wiped each. Okay? These people, not alone do they think they're above the law, but they are above the law. There was a guy, I don't know whether anyone here is familiar with a guy called Chris Hume. Chris Hume was a minister he was a member of Parliament in the UK. Chris Hume. And Chris Hume was caught speeding, and he had accumulated something like whatever. If he got these penalty points, he was off the road for a certain amount of time. So he asked the wife to take the penalty points for him, and she did. And subsequently, their marriage broke up, and hell had no fury than a woman scorned. But she reported him, and they both ended up in jail. Okay? Now, if Chris Hume had been a TD in Dáil Éireann or a senator in Dáil Éireann, he wouldn't have had 1 penalty point on his licence, because every time he would have been caught speeding, he would have made a phone call and it would have went away. Okay, it would have drifted away. But anyhow, I just have it here briefly here. Sorry, now I don't normally use notes, but I'm getting old. Just 1 second here. I'll get you the exact dates. Here we go. Just 1 second here now. That's what old age does to you. Right, just on the 4th in March 2012, and Callan mentioned this at the Public Accounts Committee back kind of over a year later. I made a complaint to the confidential recipient which related to four tickets that I knew had been corruptly fixed and terminated, right? I left it very simple for them, right? And you know a man called Oliver Connolly. Oliver Connolly used to be the Garda, the confidential recipient. Now, in my dealings with Oliver Connolly, I thought he was a very, very decent man, a very, very decent man who subsequently was thrown under a bus by Alan Shatter. But anyhow, I met him, and he handed over that complaint to the then Garda Commissioner, Mr. Callanan, on the 4th of April 2012. Okay? I expected, now even though it's a confidential process, okay, I expected a response back from Mr. Connolly within a short amount of time. Nothing. This was March 2012. Martin Callanan had it in his hands on the 4th of April 2012. In early September 2012, I still had heard nothing back, and I made a complaint under the Garda Síochána fraud policy in relation to another senior officer who had fixed a large number of tickets. He had fixed an awful lot of tickets, taken care of them. And I made a serious criminal complaint against him. And I mean, at all times, we wanted this dealt with. We wanted this tackled and dealt with. We had no wish to bring it into the public domain at that stage. We wanted just to sort it out and fixed, and the whole system corrected and fixed. Fine. That complaint, I made it on the 1st of September 2012. Of course, by the end of September, I'd heard nothing back. So at that point, we decided to go to approach politicians. And Claire Daly, I was a big fan of Claire Daly long before she became a TD. She was a union representative working in Aer Lingus up at Dublin Airport, and she was a fiery character. So that's why I liked her. So we met Claire Daly and Mick Wallace and a couple of other TDs, Lynn Flanagan, Joan Collins, or the quiet one I call her. And of course, I'm not going to go into detail. I mean, you know a lot of it, but Claire Daly went on to prime time shortly afterwards, okay? And she was brilliant on prime time. She broke the story about the fixing of the penalty points, of the fixed charge penalty notices. And in the aftermath of that, there was a war council up in Dublin Garda headquarters. They went ape, they went absolutely ape over it. And of course, they knew who we were, because when you check something on Pulse, unless, you know, if you're using your own name or whatever and your own details, it's easy to trace it back to you, you know. But in the aftermath of Claire Daly appearing on primetime, on the 12th of December 2012, I was in Cavan Garda station making more inquiries and whatever, okay, on the Pulse system, and I was confronted by two members of Garda Síochána who challenged me about my presence in the station. Now, bearing in mind, on Garda Síochána, it's the one police service, the one police force. You know, a guard in Donegal is also a guard in West Cork. There's only the one police force. And I've been into Cavan Garda station many times, as I was often in other Garda stations throughout the country or whatever. But I was confronted about what I was doing. Of course, I suspect they knew exactly what I was doing. But I was told to stop. I was asked what I was doing, and I said I was carrying out inquiries about the corrupt termination of lawfully issued penalty points notices. I let them know I was talking to a member of the Oireachtas. Okay, I gave no names, no nothing. I left the station. A couple of days later, I just have it here. Yeah, on the 4th, 2 days later, I got a phone call. I was coming back from Galway, having collected one of my children over there, and I was asked to call into Cavan Garda station. And I met the superintendent in Cavan, a lovely, decent man, no problems with him, but he read out a direction that he had received from Martin Callan. It was the first of gagging orders, the Pulse gagging orders, and directing me and Morris got one. They tried to hit the two of us simultaneously, but they failed. They actually set up a pincer movement. They tried to get the two of us at the same time, but they failed. You know, big operation to try and catch the two of us at the one time. But this superintendent, he read out a direction from Martin Callanan, directing us not to download any more information in relation to the penalty point system. Now, bearing in mind, we were acting pursuant to Section 62 of the Garda Síochána Act 2005. It allows guards to bring matters of concern to the attention of members of the Oireachtas, TDs and senators. And we were acting within the law. We weren't flipping, you know, operating outside the law. We were operating within the law. We had discovered corruption, and we reported it, and we wanted to deal with it. But anyhow, that direction was given. It was the exact wording was here, right? We were directed not to carry out any further inquiries relating to the termination of fixed charge penalty notice, and to cease disclosing said material to third parties. Okay, so that was fine. A couple of days, on the 22nd of December 2012, Shane Ross was on with Marion Finucane on her radio programme before Christmas. It was a Saturday programme. And he used the word corruption to describe what we reported. And that word corruption is the one word that's guaranteed to make the Garda authorities go absolutely bananas. They hate that word. They went absolutely apeshit, to use that phrase, when the word corruption was mentioned. Now, they were so annoyed that that was the 22nd of December. On the 27th of December, just after Christmas, I was at home on a day off, and I got a phone call from my superintendent to meet him. So I travelled on my day off down to Clonus Garda station, and the superintendent was waiting on me. And he had another, Martin Callan was very busy over Christmas, he had another direction to give out. And this time, we were formally banned from using the pulse system. We couldn't use the pulse system. Bearing in mind, the pulse system is, for any guard, it's vital. Without the pulse system, you can't do your job, because everything revolves around the pulse system, okay? I was issued with a gagging order, not to use, to not check a car, to do nothing. I couldn't go near it. I was banned off the pulse system, okay? But a couple of days later, right, on Christmas Eve, sorry, New Year's Eve, I was working in Clonus, and I arrested a guy for drunk driving. And I brought him into, we had an old, we were using an old van, Garda van, so we drove it into Monaghan with the prisoner. That's where we had to go, a prisoner. And not being able to use the pulse system to process the prisoner, I spoke to a sergeant, another decent man, but I spoke to him there, and I began to explain my situation to him. He says, no, he says, we've all been briefed and told about you, that you can't use the pulse system, whatever, they've been fully briefed, okay? That was grand. I got assistance. I managed to get help, and I charged a colleague of mine, downloaded a charge sheet. I charged a man. That was fine. We were using a van, I told you, but the crew in Monaghan, they wanted, because New Year's Eve can be rough enough, and well, it's the rough enough time of the year, and they asked us to leave the van, and they'd give us a patrol car, and to bring the patrol car back the following afternoon. That was fine. The following day we brought the car back to Monaghan, and I was in the station anyway, and you know, the usual small talk. I mean, you could hear me coming before you'd see me, you know, kind of shouting and roaring and freaking argumentative, but we were there for a short while. As it transpires, the van wasn't available, so myself and my colleague headed back towards Clonus in the patrol car. And as we were going out the front of Monaghan station, an electronic barrier, and as we were going through the barrier, an individual came hurrying towards the patrol car, and he stopped us. Now, while we were in Monaghan station, I had gone out the back and I collected, I rescue animals, rescue dogs, and I used to use shredded paper for dog bedding, and I had taken about 3 bags of old paper, the disused paper from the back of Monaghan station, and I put it in the back of the patrol car. But this genius anyway, he stopped us outside the gate on a public road, and he subjected me to a search. I'm in uniform. He subjected me to a search on the side of the public road by searching the bags and whatever. You know, he thought that I had got pulse documents, or I'd been in downloading pulse off the system or whatever. I don't know what the hell was going through his mind, but anyhow, he was all pumped up. So that was fine. I wasn't very happy. My colleague was disgusted. He was absolutely disgusted, you know, to use that word in its proper context. That was grand. A couple of weeks later, I found a rat tied to the front of the house. I found a rat tied to the front door. Okay, I never blamed anybody. I just said there was a rat tied to the front of the door, right? Okay. I carried on trying to work as usual. Now, bearing in mind that, you know, knowing O'Sullivan referred to An Garda Síochána as a family, and other commissioners down the years have referred to An Garda Síochána as a family. Well, see, the Mafia is also a family, you know. But anyhow, worked away. I did the best I can, the best I could, and I wasn't happy. There was another incident that I actually can't go into for legal reasons, but anyhow, in March, the 1st of March, the 1st of March 2012, just one second here, again, this age is terrible. It's nearly over, Trevor, you needn't worry, relax. So on the 1st of March 2013, I was in Clonus Station, and a man came to the counter, and he wanted an orderly tax form signed, and he had, I never signed documents that weren't properly filled in. I wouldn't sign them blindly, so I needed to find out when the tax on his car had expired, and I couldn't use the pull system. And I phoned up, this is something stupid, but I phoned up Monaghan Garda station, and I spoke to the guy in the patient room. It used to be that had been my cell the previous year, and I asked him to check out the car for me. And he said he couldn't check the car because he had to get a sergeant to authorise the checking of the car for me, because every check that I had to carry out had to be authorised by a sergeant. I couldn't even check a car. I couldn't even get a guard to check a car. It had to be a sergeant or whatever. But anyhow, he couldn't find a sergeant. And he says, and by the way, he says, I checked the car for you yesterday, and I shouldn't have done it because I hadn't spoken to a sergeant. So he wasn't happy. So that was fine anyway. I told he put me downstairs to the main office in Monaghan, and I spoke to another guard, and I had to explain my situation again, and this guard went off anyway, and couldn't find a sergeant, and came back anyway, and sort of just phone, bang, that was the end of the phone call. So I had to explain to your man that, listen, I can't sign your form, I can't sign the form for you, You'll have to go somewhere else. You'll have to travel off to another Garda station to get it done, The heat of the hunt anyway, I went sick that day. I couldn't be, I went sick with stress. And I decided to retire. And it's just that, you cannot, any of you that have read the Charlton report, it would not have been, it wasn't possible to remain within. I found, my position within the Garda Síochána was untenable, and I couldn't remain on. I couldn't. I couldn't financially afford to go either, but I decided to go and to fight from the outside, because you can't fight from the inside. So I applied to retire, and I left. It's just I just go back slightly. There was a very prominent person named in the media as having had penalty points wiped, numerous penalty points wiped, and I had been approached by a certain individual, a very high-profile person, and I got a serious bollocking about the fact that this person had been named in the media, and as much as telling me that, it didn't go down very well that this person had been named, this high-profile person had been named in the media. In other words, this person was above the law. I wasn't kind of, That's what I was told. In simple terms, But anyhow, on the 1st of May, I retired from the Garda Síochána. That's 2013, the 1st of May 2013. Okay? Just wind on the clock, and I know you're all dying to go to sleep, but wind on the clock until the 23rd of January 2014. It's the date when Mr. Callanan appeared before the Public Accounts Committee, and just before that, in October, on the 1st of October 2013, Alan Shatter went into Dáil Éireann, and he made a statement under Dáil privilege, and he basically attacked myself and Maurice McCabe for alleged, as he put it himself, for not cooperating with the internal Garda investigation into the penalty points controversy. It was called the O'Mahony report. John O'Mahony, the former Garda Assistant Commissioner, he carried out an investigation that we weren't very happy with. As far as I was concerned, it downplayed it downplayed the seriousness of the corruption, you know. But anyhow, Shatter put on the record at all there and that we failed to cooperate. He subsequently had to correct the record a few months later. He had to go in and apologise and correct the record to the dog. But when Martin Callan appeared for the PAC on the 23rd of January 2014, and he used the infamous word disgusting when he was describing, as he said himself, you know, only two people in a force of 13,000 had come forward making all of these allegations of malpractice and corruption, you know, and he referred to this as disgusting. Okay, now, any of you who followed the Charlton inquiry, in the aftermath of that appearance, and John McGuinness's evidence was believed, John McGuinness came out to meet Norina Sullivan was sitting beside Callan, and you might remember she handed him a note during the proceedings. But when that meeting had finished, they were in the foyer of the meeting room in the Dáil, and John McGuinness came out and they were talking about me, a story about me, and Martin Callan relayed a story to John McGuinness about the day that I had pulled an effing knacker off a horse on Grafton Street, and that I brought the horse down to the station and tied him to the front of Pearse Street Garda station, and the other fella fiddles with kids. They're the type of fucking headbangers that I'm dealing with. That's just a paraphrase. I mean, that's not, check out the exact quote, but that's it anyway in a nutshell. But that's the kind of police commissioner we had here. You know, I mean, you know, we're talking about the police commissioner of a modern Western democracy. We're not talking about the police commissioner of a third world tin pot dictatorship. And imagine saying that. Imagine then he subsequently went off and he met John McGuinness in a car park off the Naas Road, and he told him that Maurice McCabe had sexually abused his own family members and whatever, you know, his own children. It's horrendous stuff, you know. I'd advise you to read the Charlton report in detail, because you've only got the headlines in the media over the last few weeks. You know, it's a very, very interesting, and it's a very, very worrying and concerning report, you know. But just getting back finally to what I said earlier on at the beginning, that in this country, you know, the word change, the more things change in Ireland, the more they stay the same. We have a new, Maurice McCabe retired on the 1st, he retired on Thursday. Of course, he hadn't been at work for the last couple of years. It would have been impossible to work, because despite all that you have heard in the media about change and about things that are going to be great, and people who are reporting wrongdoing will be welcomed in the Garda Síochána, absolute rubbish. You do not go outside of the family. When you go outside of the Garda family, you are dead, okay? And you know, I mean, kind of an awful lot of problems in the Garda Síochána, if complaints were dealt with properly, instead of being bloody covered up, we wouldn't have half of the problems we have today. But the way the system currently is, if a complaint is made about a guard in North Donegal, the wagons are circled in Dingle, because every complaint is seen as a threat against the organisation. Now, I know that Drew Harris, and I know a lot of people were not happy with his appointment because of his past, and because of he was the Deputy Chief Constable of the PSNI, but I fully supported Drew Harris' appointment as Garda Commissioner, because he's straight, he's honest, he's a member of no clique, he can't be manipulated or pushed in a particular direction, and he doesn't care. He's going to do the job, you know, but he's going to do the job. He's a very honest man, and he's going to carry out his role as Garda Commissioner with integrity and with honesty. Wherever any investigation, regardless, you know, going back to the old, to carry out our duty as without fear, favour, malice or ill will. That's what the Guard is trained to do. Drew Harris will ensure that that is done, but he's on his own. He has no real team. He didn't bring in an independent, an outside team with him, as far as I know. And from what I gather, you have a lot of people in Garda headquarters, they can't make head nor tail of him. Now that's a very good sign, because he can't be manipulated or molded or pushed in a particular direction, you know. Yes, it's time to be quiet. But I know I've kind of ran through it, I've wandered a bit, but I've kind of skirted it. There's a lot more stuff I could go through, you know. But Maurice McCabe will go down in history as being one of the greatest Irishmen ever. You know. But we should never underestimate the pain, the suffering, the torture that he has been put through over the last 12 years or so. To label somebody a paedophile, there is nothing lower. There is nothing lower than a paedophile, and that word was deliberately used to destroy him. And lesser people have not survived. Lesser people have not. Lesser people have not survived. And you know, his kind of. I have no doubt, and I hope the man gets. I mean, no matter what compensation he gets, is not going to make up for the torture that he was subjected to over the last 12 years. Nothing will be up for it. But this is, I mean, I'm dealing with, this is my final point, I'm dealing with another guard at the moment. And for the last, you know, I'm dealing with him for the last few years. He has reported collusion between Gardaí and heroin dealers. Okay? Now, that's going to be included, the next module of the Disclosures Tribunal. You know, the next module of the Disclosures Tribunal is going to deal with that issue, and the evidence in that case will also be quite shocking. But you know, if people think that by the publication of the Charlton report and Maurice McCabe's retirement, that everything now is going to be hunky-dory going forward, they are delusional, because it will take, you know, the culture of loyalty before honesty. And I mean, I met some new guards recently, some recently qualified guards recently, and they're all, I mean, they couldn't do enough for me, really polite, decent fellas, but everybody starts off like that. And it's the toxic culture within that system that destroys guards, you know what I mean? And I think, just my final comment, I think, and it's not my idea, but I think that Templemore should be closed down altogether. Guards should be trained in a third level setting. Now, Tom Clonan made that suggestion for us. You know, Dr. Tom Clonan, he was a whistleblower in the Defence Forces. That guards should be trained in a third level setting, mixing with students of other disciplines, and then kind of, you know, getting their own separate training as well. But I think instead of this family, I mean, it would help break this family culture that's there at the moment. It's, you know, it's them and us culture that exists at the moment, you know. I don't know, I'm hopeful. I mean, we have to be hopeful, because we need a policing service we can all trust. But I can tell you, I mean, just finally, I met an ex-colleague of mine in a supermarket, and he was a couple ahead of me in a queue, and my wife was with me. And he just turned to me and he said to me, "Have you not found a rock to crawl under yet?" Now that's a couple of years ago, but that's, you know, that same attitude exists against anybody who comes forward and reports wrongdoing within the Garda Síochána. And I think that toxic culture has got to be tackled as a matter of urgency. Sorry for going on. Thank you very, very much.